Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on the Isthmus Facebook page. As people join the live stream here, we'll begin with a few quick announcements. I'm Jason Joyce, publisher of Isthmus. With me, of course, is Judith Davidoff, president and editor of Isthmus, and of course, Congressman Mark Pocan, who is in Washington tonight. We really appreciate him taking some time out of a very busy schedule to be with us. He'll hopefully detail us with a little bit of that busyness in a bit here. Isthmus is a 45-year-old news organization dedicated to providing a rich mix of in-depth news, reporting, and informed coverage of Madison culture that you won't find anywhere else. Since last spring, Isthmus is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and until the end of the year, we are reaching out to our readers to help us continue to do this important work. If you become a member now, your donation will be matched by grants from the Institute for Nonprofit News, the Loud Hound Partner Fund, and some gifts from a group of community leaders. Perhaps most importantly, you will be part of reviving an information source that helps connect Madison residents to each other and to their community. Joining is easy. Head to isthmus.com/donate, or if you're a check writer, email me at jjoyce@isthmus.com, and I'll be glad to help you out. That's jjoyce@isthmus.com. We urge you to participate in tonight's interview by typing any questions you may have for Congressman Pocan right here in the Facebook comments. And with that, I'll turn the program over to Judy Davidoff.
All right. Thank you, Jason, and welcome again, Congressman. We really appreciate your taking the time. We understand it's been a busy day. We're getting updates from your communications director. So maybe we should fill viewers in on what you were doing today and what might happen in the coming hour.
Well, first of all, it's great to be with everyone. Thanks so much. And I'm so glad the Isthmus is back and strong. And, you know, it's something that I remember, I think, from the very first day I got to Madison in school. I'm glad it's still here. So thank you for that. So what's going on is I was supposed to be in Madison this week, but because we're dealing with the debt ceiling, we had to come, and the Senate needed to act today. They did, which is rare. I rarely say the Senate did the right thing and did it on time, Judy. Oh, maybe not on time, but got it done. But we also had a couple other bills that are up today. The one on the floor right now is a resolution on Islamophobia that my friend Ilhan Omar and Jan Schakowsky are the lead sponsors of. As you know, we've had a number of rather disappointing actions, and disappointing, yes, I'm using way too loosely, by members of Congress who've made very Muslim phobic, Islamophobic comments around other members of Congress about people who are of the Muslim faith, etc. And I was actually on the floor to give my 1 minute. They give us often 1 minute to speak, knowing I get back in time just for this. And as I was speaking, Representative Perry made some remarks that he basically said Ilhan Omar was affiliated with terrorist organizations, and people wanted to take the words down. And that's something we do so that the record wouldn't have something knocking another member. Right now, they're still discussing that. So I came back here so we could all be together. But at some point, if they indeed decide that marks should be taken down, they're probably looking at the actual text right now, and the Republicans challenge that because somehow saying a member being affiliated with a terrorist organization isn't a problem to them, then I may have to run and take a vote. Yes, this is my crazy life, but that could occur, and we'll keep you posted. So far, there's no decision on what's happening, and I am very excited to answer as much as I can.
Great. Well, and we get this peek into your life and the crazy life in DC, so that's great. Yeah. Well, I thought we would start actually with some sad news today about the passing of Dick Wagner, who, former county board chair, first openly gay county board chair in Dane County. And I know you knew him for quite a long time. Wondered if you could talk a little bit about his contributions and his impact on you personally, on your career. Do you remember when you first met him?
Yeah, it was over 30 years ago. So I was in my 20s, and I was running for the county board of supervisors back in '91. It was a special election, so it was an odd year. Otherwise, usually they're in even years. And at the time, Dick Wagner, was on the county board. He had served as the head of Governor Tony Earl's LGBT, or actually Gay and Lesbian Council. I don't think they had LGBT at the time. And he had been a very accomplished, activist and elected official, community leader. And I got to meet him through that. So at the time, he and I and Tammy Baldwin were all on the county board together. Interestingly, not only was Dick really a mentor to people like Tammy and myself and many, many others over the years, but nationally, Dick was a leader for out gay and lesbian elected officials. At the time, there was an organization called INGLO, International Network of Gay and Lesbian Officials. And Dick was very active. He had a conference come to Madison once before I was elected. And I remember we had more out gay and lesbian elected officials in Dane County, Wisconsin, than the entire state of California. Think about that.
Wow.
That was in the—
That's an accomplishment.
early to mid 90s. But honestly, a lot of that was because of Dick Wagner. He was a mentor to many around the country, but certainly in our backyard. So, he was the county board chair. He helped shepherd things like Monona Terrace. He's served on so many boards. He recently, in his retirement, wrote 2 books on the LGBT history in Wisconsin. But honestly, I don't know if there would be a Mark Pocan or a Tammy Baldwin or a Mike Revere. I could go down the list if it wasn't for Dick Wagner. So I was very sad to hear last night about his passing. And, he was someone who had a big impact, a truly big impact on many of us.
Yeah. It seems all the accolades that are coming in and sad. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. Guess I wanted to go back in history a little bit as well. I was looking some things up because of all the news about elections these days and election overhaul. And I remembered it was almost about 15 years ago that you and Mark Gundrum, then a state representative, were going around to newsrooms around the state, including the Capital Times, where I was a reporter at the time, pitching this idea for reform of the state elections and ethics administration. The Government Accountability Board came out of that. And then that was eliminated in favor of the Wisconsin Elections Commission. And, I've just been thinking a lot about that, of course, since we've had all of the criticisms about the election, the presidential election, and then what's happened in states, including Wisconsin. And I guess just, looking back 2006, I mean, would you have ever imagined that elections administration would have become this fraught and really threatened by partisan politics?
No. Mark Gundrum and I had, we're both Marks. That's about all we had in common. Right.
The odd couple, I believe, the State Journal put in one of the headlines.
Yeah, we would definitely be an odd couple, no question. But we were trying to give teeth to the ability to have good and fair elections and ethics in Wisconsin, which, by the way, we have some of the strongest ethics laws in the country, and that's a great thing in Wisconsin. But to think about now what's happening with, what could be best described as a political Shriner car circus, with a former Supreme Court judge hiring, partisans, hiring people who challenge elections to now try to do a fair review of the election. I mean, all of this is like, a bad novel that if you'd have said 10 or 15 years ago at that time, we always said, well, no one would ever believe something as ridiculous as this. Well, now it's called life in the Wisconsin legislature and life with this commission. I think the good news is we still have some people who believe what Mark and I did even now. I saw, the person who's the head of elections for the state Senate say, okay, this should wrap up soon.
Yes.
It's not like a never-ending fishing expedition, which is what, I think you're seeing Mike Gableman try to do. But we don't have a lot of that. And we don't have it certainly at the national level. I mean, the fact that outside of Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, we don't have anyone willing to stand up for the rule of law and for what happened on January 6th there. I mean, all these things I never would have thought would have happened in my lifetime. I don't think we thought of back when we went around trying to propose these changes. But it certainly is sad to someone who I consider myself a bit of an institutionalist, Judy, and I respect the institution. And, I think what's happening right now is really damaging, regardless of what political party is in charge. This is damaging to an important institution.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think created this? What's the environment that, yes, you're right, that, the state senator, Kathy Bernier, I believe, did really call out the Gableman investigation, but not many others are
Yeah,
doing the same.
this is all a creation of Donald Trump's 4 years in office, right? I mean, I don't know if you ever seen the movie Idiocracy.
No, I haven't.
Oh God, put it on your list for a wine night. It really felt like the Donald Trump presidency brought us towards this dumb comedy movie being reality about, how much can you dumb down government, right? And again, as someone who cares about institutions, I really, was very concerned and still am concerned about Donald Trump, right? I mean, he wouldn't accept an election. He lost by 7 million votes nationally. And, we have to have a commission to look at the attacks on the US Capitol that I was here during on January 6th. But all of this was caused by someone who, got to the Oval Office, who never probably should have been there, who has no respect for his office and has no respect for the country or institutions. And it's all about him. He's a narcissist in chief at the time, and he still is to this day, trying to fight the fact that he lost by one of the largest margins in American history. But to him and to some of his supporters still, it's made us take this very ugly path.
Yeah. Yes. And people still support him, and not the institutions, not the public workers either.
Yeah, it's fine. I don't think I ever would have thought, my friend John Nichols would be laughing at me right now, that I ever would say, I credit Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for at least standing up. We disagree on many, many issues, but they stood up for the country over their political party. But they're the only two. And that's just kind of sad, at a time that we need, after coming out of a pandemic that's killed now 800,000 people. You'd think people would be unifying and rallying together. Instead, we're kind of reliving the same old lies.
Yeah. I mean, how dangerous and how threatened is our democracy in light of these events and attacks? Very.
I mean, when you see the attacks on voting, I introduced years ago a constitutional amendment to guarantee a right to vote, because there is no explicit right to vote in the Constitution. We talk about discrimination in voting in the Constitution, but there's no explicit right. Because of that, we play whack-a-mole. Every state can have different laws, slightly different laws, and they can make it harder for some people to vote. And that's what we often see, these attacks happening. Right now, I think there's over 400 or 500 laws in, I believe, every state but one right now introduced to make it harder for people to be able to vote. And yet clearly, when you become a citizen, there's a question. And I think the question is, what's your most important right as an American? And the answer is the right to vote. But there actually isn't a constitutional right to vote. If we had that, you wouldn't have every state doing what they're doing. You'd have to prove that you're not harming a citizen. Right now, you have to prove that a law is harming your ability to vote. And that's why we have this patchwork of laws and we have these attacks that we see. On top of that, you have gerrymandering, where politicians pick their voters rather than the other way around, which Wisconsin is at the top of the list for doing that. Clearly, that's a problem. And then when you see things like these election reviews, or the fact that you had people going to challenge 7 states, they were going to challenge Wisconsin's election in Congress to try to overturn the results. That's what all happened on January 6th. Because of what happened, they didn't wind up taking Wisconsin. They think they went after 1 or 2 states that day, and they stopped. But the plan was they were going to go after 7 states. And I was actually in my office that day preparing for that debate, because the Wisconsin members, Gwen Moore, Ron Kine, and myself, were going to lead that debate for that hour. They would have challenged Wisconsin. But these are all things that are now in a reality. Again, I never would have thought would have happened, but they're real.
Yeah. So speaking of some of what's going on in the state, of course, the elected official who hired Gableman is Robin Vos, someone, as you've known a long time, have been friends with. I know Isthmus did a piece and other people have done pieces about your friendship. Have you talked to him at all about voting issues and the audit into the state's election or any of that?
Yes, but not since August. but I have. I am still friends with Robin Voss, and I know that's a statement that right now I'm probably getting some comments on Facebook. But you know, I sat next to Robin for 8 hours a day, 3 or 4 days a week for months at a time doing a budget, and got to know him. And you know, there are things I've worked with him, and we've gotten things done. And this issue, you know, I do give him credit. He has said some things that should have got national news that never did. Judy, I don't know if you remember at the Republican convention, Trump, that's the first time Trump went after him for not having something to look at the election. And he was asked a question, and it was on TV, where they said, do you think that our election was, you know, improper, or that, you know, whatever happened? And his answer was, well, I'm not saying that there could have been something. However, I also know that 50,000 people voted for a Republican for Congress in the state of Wisconsin and didn't vote for Donald Trump. And you have to look at that too. These days, that is akin to, you know, making a marriage proposal to Liz Cheney, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. And yet he said that on a news proposal. So I think watching what's happening right now, you know, I think they're doing this effort because there's tremendous pressure from Trump and the National Republican Party to all of these states to deal with this. But I also agree with the Republican senator today who said enough is enough. Like, you know, this is a fishing expedition. You know, there's not even, you know, bottom carp right now for you. Why are we still doing this? I think that's where we're at. And I do think it's also time to pull the plug.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Any word in DC about Ron Johnson running or not? Any rumors or everyone's waiting?
You know, I mean, people ask me all the time, if I had to bet, I'll go 3-1 odds he's running. You know, I think if he wasn't, you'd have a little more indication. But, you know, Ron Johnson has gone full Rojo. That's how I describe it. I don't know how else to describe it. You know, his most recent mouthwash COVID comments. I just told one of my colleagues today, and they were like, what? They had not heard that. So I guess that was special for us in Wisconsin because he's our senator. But I would guess that he's going to run. Yeah.
Do you think the mouthwash those are for real, or is that, I don't know, some kind of plain dumb?
I will not remove a word from that sentence. Let's just say I think he has very strong opinions. He is not afraid to vocalize them. Others might, you know, have staff that say, are you sure you want to say that? When I first moved out to the town of Vermont now 8 years ago, Judy, there's a pond in the yard and there's frogs. In spring, they're mating and they're really loud. If you have your windows open, it's so nice to sleep to frogs mating. And I made a comment. I came back to DC and I said, I love listening to frogs mate. And the response was, things you're not allowed to ever say out loud again. So generally we have staff that help us on things.
Help you, right?
In this case, I don't know if that's happening. I think you're getting a very unplugged version.
Unfiltered.
Yeah. And I think, you know, he truly believes that mouthwash can be helpful to combat COVID. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess speaking of the Senate race, any thoughts on the different candidates or what might be the winning strategy for Democrats in that race?
Let me answer the second part first. You can't just say I'm not Ron Johnson. If we do that, we'll lose. You also have to say what you're for. And fortunately, Democrats have a pretty big agenda right now. And once we get Build Back Better done, we're going to have a lot to talk about. So I think that's real important. We can't just be against somebody. We also have to be for something. Having said all that, I think there's a lot of really good candidates with different backgrounds running. I'm right now choosing to do the role I did during the governor's race, which is I'm not endorsing anyone, but if I see anyone do something I think that's unfair, that's not becoming of, you know, you can have differences clearly in a primary, but something that, you know, could actually risk our chances of defeating Ron Johnson. I'll first call the candidate, and I've done this once so far. And then if they do it another time, I will call them out publicly. I did that in the governor's race, and everyone behaved well. And because of it, we had no scars going into that race against Scott Walker, and we beat Scott Walker. And I think I'm trying to play that model again. So I have great respect for many of the candidates. There's a few I don't know, but for the most part, I think you've got a lot of great people who are running. And I just want to make sure that we realize we're running against Ron Johnson and not each other.
Right. So keeping it civil and on policy. All right.
I mean, you can say, look, I'm a business person, therefore I can do this, or I'm a, elected official, therefore I can do this. That's all fine. And you can compare your positions. I'm for Medicare for all, and therefore, Band-Aids, I mean, if that's what they're actually for, if their policy, whatever it is, that's fine. Where it's not fair is when you get into, I think, personal matters or distorting a position for political gain. And again, Wisconsin Democrats, I'm hoping that would never happen. It didn't happen in the governor's race. So hopefully that's a lesson to everyone running. If you want to get elected, you may be the nominee. You don't want to be damaged goods. Let's remember how Tony Evers got elected.
Right, right. And do you think that it's still going to be turning out the base in the larger cities? That's going to be the winning strategy for this race? Or
a good ground game is always whenever we have more voters, Democrats do better. People agree with Democrats in general on the issues. If we pass Build Back Better, which I think we're going to, but still it's in the Senate right now, and I try not to predict the US Senate too often.
Yeah.
But when that gets done, between the first the rescue plan we had this year earlier that put a lot of money into people's pockets, it put money into local communities, it helped all sorts of things in getting out of COVID. And top of the infrastructure bill that's going to invest $1.2 trillion into roads and bridges and schools and broadband and clean pipes and electric charging stations and all sorts of things. And then if you throw in Build Back Better, where you have childcare, you don't pay more than 7% of your income for childcare, universal pre-K, expanding Medicare to things like hearing aids, negotiating for prescription drug prices through Medicare, all sorts of things that'll save people money and reduce inflation. When you have those things all going together, we've got a lot to talk about as Democrats that will really benefit the average person. And that's why, again, I think it's, part that, it's part Ron Johnson's record. It's part what we've done and what we can still do that's important.
In terms of the infrastructure bill, what are some of the impacts we're going to see locally, Madison area, throughout your district?
There was just an article I saw in the last week talking about money for cleaning pipes to get pipes that may be contaminated or removed so people can have clean drinking water. Like, is this really a debate? I guess it has been, because for years we've talked about infrastructure and not delivered on it. Now we've delivered on it without a single Republican vote in Congress from Wisconsin, by the way. I do want to add that. Our delegation did not come through. But that's like just one great example. There will be additional money for roads and bridges, for broadband, something that in my congressional district, there's a lot of areas that are still struggling to have connectivity at a time we saw through COVID. More important than ever, you have that connectivity. The charging stations, I think it's 500,000 charging stations across the country to help incentivize and get towards the point of getting rid of, gasoline fuel vehicles. I mean, there's a lot of things that you're going to see money coming to Wisconsin, being invested in our state, in our infrastructure, that I think will be extremely helpful, not just for what they purchase, but for the jobs that come with them along the way.
And with the Build Back Better plan, something I know that we've been interested in is the provisions of the Local Journalism Sustainability Act that made their way in. And this is a bill, for those who might not know, that supports or would support local news with different tax credits. And you were a co-sponsor of that. And maybe we can talk a little, the piece that went through is this refundable payroll tax credit, which would really mean some big cash for local news outlets.
It's been tough. You know this, right, Judy? I mean, you saw what you've just gone through at the Isthmus. And I'll tell you, I'm a journalism major. So one of my, unfortunately, there's a lot of young 20-something journalists who I think get tired of hearing this from me in Washington if they work for some of the capital so-called, the newspapers, the daily newspapers out here. I care about journalism a lot. And I think it's important that you get it right, not just fast, right? And the problem is with these national, when everything goes to the national level, you don't always get it right. You get a race to get it first. And then there's some sloppiness. And I can tell you, during Build Back Better, the question I got asked the most was, when are you going to vote on it? Is it going to be today, Monday? Is it going to be Wednesday? And they do this for weeks on end. No one ever back home said, what day are you voting on the bill? They wanted to know what's in the bill, right? But when you just have national sources, you lose that local connection, local contact. And think about all the stories that you cover that have such an impact back home. I mean, that people really are following. I love the event calendar alone, that you have, right? It's those sort of things calendar that you won't get when you just have, some big mega media, some social media giants and what's left. So it's really important that we do everything we can to keep those local sources. And by the way, people still trust local media where they don't trust the national media. And that's all the more important, so that, we need that check on people like me, local government, right? You've got to have what you're doing to make sure those things are in the public interest. And if you lose that local media, there's no way you'll get that just with national media. So it's really, really important. And hopefully those provisions will stay in the bill will pass.
Yeah, I always wonder, I mean, it's really still such a small slice compared to other things that are in there if someone would really target it for elimination, because it won't.
I think you're okay. So here's the thing. So the Progressive Caucus is near and dear. I chaired it for 4 years, and I'm the chair emeritus now. I guess I'm an emeritus. I never had that title before. But, we held out our votes on the infrastructure bill to get talks going on Build Back Better. And because of it, a whole lot got added to Build Back Better. First of all, the amount of money that's going to be spent, what's in the bill, the talks, 95% of what's in the bill has been pre-cleared through the Democratic senators. Mm-hmm. It's a couple remaining items, and then the speaker added a few things that final Wednesday. By few things, like another 4 things or something that still have to be kind of largely worked out, but the rest is largely done already. So I believe that those items and the childcare provisions that I think are really, really important, the pre-K, universal pre-K, the expansion of Medicare for hearing aids, the prescription drug parts, I'm hoping will be there, but all of those were kind of pre-cleared already. So I think we're okay, but we still have to, with a 50-50 Senate, get a bill done. And trust me, I use this example. It's like, we were at a beach and we found a little, magic lantern, and we rubbed it, and we got this genie with a bad attitude and bad sense of humor. We said, give us a Democratic House, Senate, and a president. Boom, we get it. And then they give us a 50-50 Senate, a 3-vote margin out of 435 votes in the House, and nothing is easy. So that's kind of where we're at on getting things done. But in the House, we have gotten our portion done. So we're just waiting on the Senate.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have a few more, but questions popped up, so we might as well make sure we get them in from viewers. Sean asked, will we see redistricting happen? Guess I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, well, I can talk about where I understand it to be, which is, I think the same that, Judy, but it looks like the state Supreme Court will be ultimately, determining the lines. For a while, we weren't sure if it was going to go to federal court or the state Supreme Court. It looks like the state Supreme Court's going to have jurisdiction unless something comes up. They have ruled that they think the least change is where they want to go. Many of us have a huge problem with that, because 10 years ago, it was drastic change, and now you're locking it in. Heavy gerrymandering by doing least change. So my guess is that the state Senate will have, state Senate, I keep saying, the state Supreme Court will have maps for us sometime in January. I think the federal courts had said we needed everything by March 1. We start doing nomination papers in April. So, we kind of have to have lines and know where districts are by then. But, I am concerned that a conservative leaning Supreme Court, if they decide to be partisan, which they have been, I think, in that one decision, could make things very difficult.
Yeah. I was talking to one of our columnists, Nada El-Makashfi, and don't really want to give everything away, but she was talking about the, sometimes the margins in these districts and, what Democrats can do to get out the vote and reach voters in the district so that, this idea of the redistricting, locking in these districts and then, just figuring no change forever for at least 10 years. You did a lot of the strategy for Dems when you were in the state legislature. And do you see opportunity in different ways of getting out the vote and reaching voters around the state?
Yeah, so first of all, just bluntly, it's not a perfect scenario, right? Having a conservative leaning Supreme Court that's already made a heavily political decision. So having said that, when we've had previous redistrictings that I've gone through when I was in the legislature, where more fair courts drew the maps, you had decades where you had Democrats and Republicans in control. So by our population, by our voting, absolutely, anyone should be able to be in control. However, how you draw the maps can really dig some of that in more because you have certain places like Madison and Milwaukee where there's more Democratic votes concentrated, right? And they can try to pack districts with more Democrats to have more Republican districts, by compacting those bigger cities where some of those urban areas are. However, I do think the assembly, there's a better chance that you could still have more fair maps because it's so extremely gerrymandered right now than maybe the state Senate. So there's still some promise that you can pick up seats, but until we really see what they're going to do, it's difficult. So yes, previous experience with courts can draw fair maps. However, as we've talked, things have changed a lot over the last several decades as we've done these redistrictings that could make that more difficult. But the good news is you can't redistrict a state as itself. So statewide elected officials, you still are going to have Governor Evers and whoever is running for the U.S. Senate, running statewide, and gerrymandering can't at least affect them.
Yeah. Going back, I remembered I wanted to, because you had mentioned being in the Capitol last January 6th. Can you talk a little bit about that day and what it was like for you?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I had to get my news from on one TV, CNN, and the other TV, MSNBC, because we would get some emails, but there was very little information coming to us. A number of my colleagues were in the chambers. You couldn't be on the floor because of COVID rules at the time. I think limited it to 20 people from each party on the floor from each house. Republicans didn't abide by that. Democrats did. So we had a lot of people in the gallery where you can watch proceedings spaced apart. For some of us, the 7 states that were going to be challenged, we were back in our offices getting ready to lead that hour of debate on our state because we assumed that we were going to be challenged, because that's what the Republicans had indicated. So I was getting ready. In fact, I had what I thought was a really great way to try to prove my point about what happened in Wisconsin's elections. But I was up on the 7th floor of Longworth during all this. When this happened, they got people out of the floor pretty quickly, but my colleagues that were in the gallery were stuck up there for another 45 minutes during all this. So they could hear everything, see everything. They were on the floor, and then they got whisked away all into one room with a bunch of members on top of each other. Don't forget, this is peak COVID back in January. And we hadn't had our shots yet, or just got your first shot for most members. And because of it, some of my colleagues, one of my best friends in Congress, Pramila Jayapal from Seattle, she got COVID because Republicans refused to wear masks in these crowded rooms with members. And then she gave it to her spouse after that, right? So, and I've got other colleagues, Dan Kildee, who came in my class, and a good friend who's actually he's going through therapy still from being in that situation. I was fortunate, right? I guess I was up here doing homework. Maybe I geeked out too much, but I had to do what I had to do. And then because I'm on the 7th floor, I'm also on the roof of Longworth. I did go out on the roof and look at things, and I could see the thousands of people on each side. And that's often something people don't know, but it was on each side of the Capitol, not just one side where this was happening. So I saw those visuals. I, experienced very little information. We were in lockdown, so, we really couldn't go anywhere, but that was fine. But what I'm most happy that we did, and our leadership made the right decision, is when they got everything cleared out, and it was hours later, that we still went and voted.
Right.
And we did what we had to do, because we couldn't let that insurrection become a reality. Now, here's the sad part, Judy. There's a candidate running for Congress in Wisconsin who attended the insurrection, who used campaign funds to come out, they say, for other things, but attended the insurrection. The fact that a major candidate that the Republican Party are solidified behind in Wisconsin is one of those people.
Yeah.
It's scary, right? And it kind of
apparently
tells you where we're at.
One of others, right? Not the only one. Yeah.
And there will be absolutely others. And, don't forget my colleagues now, it used to be that the Tea Party were the conservatives, right? Like they're the extreme element coming in around 2010. They're now moderates, because now you have the Q factor. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Madison Cawthorn, and a whole bunch of others that make the Tea Party look like people you'd actually have a tea party with, as opposed to this new, and you have it at the state capitol as well in Madison. So it's just, it's a different reality, but the January 6th is something that, there's a reason why we have a commission going to get to the bottom of what happened. I mean, just yesterday, we saw the Mark Meadows emails released, or text messages. Donald Trump Jr. was texting him saying, you got to get this to stop. You need a stronger statement. All these people now who act like nothing happened, that day they spoke in the moment the truth. And that's why we have to have this commission, because we can never, ever let this happen again.
Yeah. I mean, how hard is that for people to, rewrite history in front of your eyes when you saw it and experienced it? And we've seen so much more information come out about, just how violent the attack was.
I think the biggest shocker for me is that this is all on video. We all saw this happening. Right. And the fact that people are trying to rewrite it after we've all seen what happened. I mean, our Senator Johnson, I guess our senior senator, has said that this was not that different than a normal day of tourists.
Right.
I don't remember another day like this with tourists, right? And that's what's, I think, perhaps most astounding, is we've seen this with our own eyes. I may have been here and experienced it a little closer, but everyone else has seen what unfolded and seen the video over and over. For anyone to say that that was anything but what it was is truly astounding.
Yeah. Seems to me that is a major difference. I mean, you've always, of course, had political spin, right? You always have choosing which facts to present for an argument. But it does seem like this is a bit of a new world where you really can't agree on facts that are right out there. And, there seems to be few repercussions for not telling the truth. And
the fact that we're right now, we've had a number of members that we've had to take action against on the floor of Congress and kick off of committees. I mean, most recently, Lauren Boebert made up a story about Ilhan Omar getting on an elevator with her, which everyone admits it's a made up story. It never happened. And she made some comment about at least she didn't have a backpack full of like explosives because she's Muslim in faith. Unpack all the craziness in that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one, you're making up stories that aren't even true about your colleagues. Two, you just, attacked an entire religion. And three, you attacked one of your colleagues with a lie, made a very pathetic apology. One of those, well, I'm sorry if anyone is offended.
Sorry if I offended you.
Right. And then proceeded to then have a call to personally apologize, and instead asked for an apology from Ilhan Omar for a bunch of other unrelated things. And the problem is, this is done for two reasons. The primary reason is it's done to please an audience of one, Donald Trump, right? Number two, it also really helps you fundraise. When we kicked Marjorie Taylor Greene off of her committees earlier in the year, she raised $3 million that quarter. Now, for context, it would probably take me, at the rate I raise money, 5 to 6 years to raise $3 million. She did in a quarter by just doing something that's so offensive that Congress had to take action and kick her off of committees. You know, this is unfortunately becoming the new reality. I can't wait till this reality ends because, again, I care about the institution, but it's stunning.
So are there any things that can be done to address that issue? I mean,
Yeah,
I know that, you know, we have a lot of disinformation that goes out. We have, you know, social media. Everyone can publish pretty much what they want to, right?
I think when Donald Trump fades into the distance, we'll be better off.
Yeah.
I don't see another reality show star running for president, right? Because that was part of the problem, I think, where the credentials where he came from. But that is the big difference, right? When we can have not everyone trying to appeal to Donald Trump because he controls Republican primaries so much, because he doesn't control the general electorate, but he does control that Republican primary electorate really well. And people are afraid of him within the Republican Party, which is why they don't stand up to him. So I think once, you know, whether it be because he gets prosecuted by a state for something, whether it be as more of this information comes out and he looks worse and worse, whether it be he decides to leave politics completely and maybe, you know, start a restaurant chain, whatever he might do, I don't know. Whatever can remove him from this will be helpful. And then hopefully, you know, we can get back to where Republicans and Democrats can disagree, but not do it in such a devastating way.
I mean, how different has it been? Of course, he's still around, right? Not the president. But how different has the last year or so been compared to 4 years, you know, prior when Trump was actually president?
Well, at least we're not just playing the goalie, right? Playing defense, trying to stop something bad from happening. So we're actually able to, even with really tight margins, get something done. However, you know, show me one Republican leader right now.
Yeah.
You know, they're not, right? Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell are still allowing Donald Trump to run the party. There's no governor that's really standing out in the Republican Party, standing up to Donald Trump. So because of it, Donald Trump is still got the leader in exile in some ways down in Mar-a-Lago or wherever he's at, kind of still controlling things. Yeah. And because of it, you know, that's also a problem for the Republican Party because it's really become more of a cult of an individual, Donald Trump, than a political party. Don't forget, in the last Republican National Convention, first time ever that I know of, a political party didn't have a platform because whatever Donald Trump wanted was the platform, right? That's called a cult in any other context. And yet that's what they've become. So, you know, again, I've been doing this for just about 30 years. 91, I was elected to the county board, you know, with Dick Wagner and Tammy Baldwin, you know, back in the day. You know, I've watched this, and where we're at right now worries me an awful lot.
Yeah. We actually do have a question a little bit on those lines, but for you, the biggest difference serving in the state assembly versus Congress for you?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think every level of government, the best way to describe it is county board, I could impact, you know, people of Dane County pretty quickly, you know, through passing things and getting it done, and used to cover this. So you know how things work, you know, went to the state legislature and you could impact more people, right? 5.7 million people in the state of Wisconsin, but things went much more slowly. The federal level, it's exponential. I can impact 335 plus million people, plus through international relations, even more, but it's glacially slow. You know, there's sloths watching us going, why does Congress move so slowly, right? You know, that's the kind of pace that it operates. So that's probably the biggest change. The other thing, and I just recently, when John Erpenbach stepped down, I talked to a couple of the people who represent assembly districts in that Senate district to see what they were thinking. And, you know, I had great personal relationships, you know, I think with other state legislators, and including on the Republican side of the aisle. You know, here, there's a lot more individual sport players rather than team players. I mean, there's people that if they see a camera, just don't get in the way. You'll be trampled over in both parties. And there's a lot of that. So, you know, I think you find your tribe, so to speak. So for me, it's been the Progressive Caucus, right? That's where, you know, many of my friends are in Congress, and that's where my values are. And you know, I'm here to get something done that will affect people. And, you know, that camera once in a while is nice if it happens to be close, but, you know, I prefer air and water for surviving, but not, you know, not everyone here does that.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the Progressive Caucus, you know, they're definitely, you know, the pundits kind of went wild after the Virginia governor's race. And, you know, the narrative emerges of, you know, do Democrats need to be centrist and walk that line for success? So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, mainstream corporate media is always corporate media, right? And, you know, we're not the ones that corporations usually come to for favors because, you know, our priorities are, you know, progressive values, people driven. How do you help improve someone's life so that, you know, their kids can be better off than they were? How can you make sure that people are getting a good wage and have health care for their family and can afford that family vacation? I mean, that's kind of stuff that I think about every single day in the work that I do. But I'm not thinking about how what corporate tax break could make stockholders in company X or corporate giant, you know, Y more profitable. And yet there are people who do that here every day in Congress. So, you know, I think it's often easy to say that, but, you know, I'll tell you, I got to admit, as jaded as I can be sometime about Washington, Judy, and I can be very jaded at times about Washington. I had a couple occasions to be in the Oval Office for a couple hours with the president with a small group of people. And I won't forget it. It was very special. I mean, it really meant something. But to be able to actually sit there with the president, he wrote Build Back Better. That agenda was a $6 trillion proposal of many things to help the average person. And we had his back more than anyone in Congress because we were willing to hold our votes out and not just take an easy vote to get the right thing done. And I think he appreciated that. You know, we often, when we met with him, it was half celebration, half strategy, as opposed to when the more corporate leaning Dems met with him. It's like, how can we get this done? What do you need? What, you know, what are your values? We know our values, right? We're not sitting around with trying to find a compass. And because of that, again, you know, often corporate media doesn't treat us as well. And I'm fine with that because I know, as does the White House, as do many people here in Washington, that had we not held out on the infrastructure bill, we still got it done. It was important. But had we not done that, you probably never would have had a Build Back Better. And even though it's not quite done, I still believe it will be done. And there is going to be a lot for the average American family. I mean, if I can just give you one example, if the bill stays this way, because I think this is important, Judy. If you're a couple making $100,000, all right, and you have a kid who's 3 years old, and you want to have them in daycare. Right now in Madison, daycare is about $15,600, about $300 a week, right, for daycare. If you're making $100,000, that's a good chunk of your income, 15% of your gross income, much less your take home. Under this proposal, you'll pay no more than 7% of your income on childcare. That's an $8,600 savings for that young family. Then take the child tax break that's also in there, and that's another $300 a month for that child who's 3 years old, who's in the daycare. Add that to the $8,600, you're up to over $12,000 a year. That's $1,000 a month difference that's in that family's bank account, whether it be to save for higher education, to spend on healthcare or a vacation, or just to have immediately for clothes and things. That's what Democrats are going to get done when Build Back Better gets passed. And I don't see those provisions leaving the bill. So that's got a true impact on people. I have to turn the volume down. They just came back after all that time, Judy. I'm telling you, it took an hour to figure out whatever they were doing, but they haven't called us in for a vote yet.
Okay. Let's see. Any thoughts on the Ron Kind seat? Think there's any chance to hold on?
There's a primary there. I think, you know, whoever wins that is going to be in a good position to have an intellectual debate with the voters of the 3rd Congressional District because, the candidate that I mentioned that attended the insurrection is from that district on the Republican side of the aisle, and Donald Trump supporting that person, as is the whole Wisconsin Republican delegation. That person also, and I believe you reported on this, I could be wrong in the Isthmus, but I thought you did, went to the Prairie du Chien Library. Maybe it wasn't in the Isthmus.
Yeah, I don't think we had it, but this was, yeah.
Wisconsin Examiner, I believe, had this. Okay, now I think about it. But he went to the Prairie du Chien Library, and there was an LGBT pride display, and there was a 17-year-old intern behind that display. And this candidate got into an argument with the 17-year-old intern. So here, an adult, using my fingers like crazy on this one, got into a fight with a 17-year-old intern at the library, and then proceeded to check out all the LGBT books except for one because someone was reading it at the time. And I think the intention was clearly not to return them. Once the news got out, he had to return all the books. Oh, I'm not a homophobe, blah, blah, blah. But clearly, a candidate like this is not representative even of a moderate or a conservative in Wisconsin. I mean, I know a lot of conservatives that would never put up with that sort of rationale. And I just think it's, we're going to be in a much better position talking about issues around the economy, talking about, Wisconsin families, talking about agriculture in that district, rather than, talking about how nice it is to attend insurrections and fights with 17-year-olds aren't going to be the greatest thing to run on.
All right. Anything we didn't cover that you just want to take this opportunity to talk about? Of course, I know they're huge issues, but hard to kind of touch on climate change and, the
one I'll mention, because it doesn't relate to my committees per se, but it's an interest area because of the district, is international issues. And I never really dealt with those in the legislature previously. And, I have dealt a lot with a couple issues. Yemen, which I think is one of the biggest humanitarian crises in the world. A lot of people don't even in Congress probably could never find Yemen on a map for you. We did a lot of work around that to try to stop what was happening. There were 500,000 kids who were facing starvation because of an ongoing war. The Middle East, Israel and Palestine, I've gone now 3 times to that region. And, I come at it from a perspective of just wanting to make sure we never have to send American men and women into battle there. But, there's a lot of things that have to change to make sure that will ever happen. I still deal with South American issues. We did a little bit in the county board. We had formed a sister city in Colombia, and Madison as a sister city in El Salvador and in some other places. I've been to both of those sister cities, but now I deal with that a little bit more holistically. But we have a lot of people back home who are very interested in these issues. So I've done a lot of work on that, even though they don't relate to my committee's jurisdiction. But I never had that experience in local or state government. And that's something I guess I just mentioned because in some ways I have been a bit of a national leader in talking about, human rights for Palestinians, for example, is an issue that, wouldn't necessarily naturally come out of my appropriations role, my main committee I serve on, or my education and labor committee role. But I think it's important. And as you know, there's an informal sister city relationship with Rafah in Gaza and Madison. And, Gaza is right up on that list with Yemen and Syria and a few other places where the conditions are so awful,
Yeah, when was the last time? I know you visited Israel.
I just went in 2 months ago.
Okay.
So I went 2013, 2016, and then this year. And unfortunately, I came back a little bit pessimistic, looking at both the Palestinian side and the Israeli side. Conditions have in some ways worsened on both sides. The good news is Benjamin Netanyahu's gone and Donald Trump is gone, because they both caused, I think, a lot of things that made conditions worse for everyone. But there's other structural things that just need to be fixed. And, in Gaza in particular, I think I've become mildly obsessed on the subject because no one else wants to talk about it. There's 2.1 million people there. 1.2 million are on food assistance from the UN, from UNRWA. That's the UN agency that deals with it. 98% of the water is undrinkable. 90,000 people right now are displaced because of the last bombings that happened. Someone explained it. The conditions are just not miserable enough that you can get by. And that's like the goal of having it there. And it's just so sad to hear that. So issues like that, I've done a lot of work on, and I wind up signing onto a lot of legislation with different things around the world because, I think because we have this sister city relationship with so many different continents and countries, that it's become a part of me.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you wouldn't have had that opportunity, right, at the state.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I don't know if there are any questions elsewhere. Well, I think that covered a lot of ground. We made it. You didn't get called out.
No, this is good.
Jason, if there's no one else, I think we could wrap it up and let the representative go have a breather. Does this mean you're going to be
Congress's inefficiency worked?
Does this mean you'll be up all night, basically just waiting to?
They told us that if it gets much past 11, they'll have us come back tomorrow morning. We weren't supposed to be in this week at all, but we have to deal with the debt ceiling. Clearly, debt ceiling is one of these bizarre Washington things. Real quick, so if you sign a mortgage, you don't make a decision every month or not whether or not you're going to pay it, right? You owe the mortgage. You signed a document. It's no different. The debt ceiling. If we authorize expending money as a federal government, we have this weird thing where then you have to lift the debt ceiling as a second vote, which is ridiculous. And that's why we're here today, is to make sure that we keep the full faith and credit of the United States government. Just that little
That really is bizarre when you put it out that way, right? We're obligated. Right.
And usually both parties work together. But again, I think I would just argue why? Like, why do we even have this step? Because it's become a tool for obstruction. And, fortunately, in this case, Mitch McConnell has been more of the adult than Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader in my house, because he's been around a little longer. He understands that faulting on your bills can cause all kinds of terrible economic ripples for real people. Kevin McCarthy, he's still trying to get a better seat at Christmas dinner at Mar-a-Lago. So,
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was really great.
Thank you, Congressman. Judy, thank you very much. It's been a lesson in government and politics tonight, as usual. Isthmus.com/donate. Please help us make our goal here for the year-end fundraising, and have a great night, everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Good luck to you, Congressman.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.